series today, and we're going to talk about season extension. And first thing I noticed that I said a minute ago is that it's warm inside this high tunnel.
High tunnel, yes.
The first question I want to ask you is, why do you use season extension?
Well, because it is warm. So we can grow things and harvest things year around. We do, well, you're probably going to ask me this, but you know, we make it warmer in the summertime, and in the wintertime it protects tender plants from the environment. Too much rain and the wind, both are very desiccating. So that's why we do high tunnels, yeah.
And how long have you been using season extension?
Well, a good 10 years, I think, yeah. Yeah, we just started growing vegetables 15, 16 years ago, so I'd say probably 10 years ago, yeah. Yeah.
Where did you learn about season extension?
Oh, well, Elliot Coleman, I suppose, got me started, because even in his first book, he talks about building movable greenhouses, and then, of course, the information has exploded from there on when he proposed being able to harvest all winter. And our customers here in the Pacific Northwest, you know, we have people we wanted to keep employed, and so it was just really logical to extend the season so that we could keep people employed and keep CSA members around and keep our store open as well, because when you drop it in the wintertime, it just seems like a lot harder to get people back in the spring.
So one of my questions was, what does season extension do for your bottom line?
Oh, well, we think it helps a lot. Yeah, because we can harvest and sell things all winter long. There are some things I really don't want to purchase from other people.
Yeah.
We can grow it better or do it better, and then so it gives us some income in the wintertime to hire people in the wintertime.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you have local suppliers for the materials you need for?
Pretty much so. The big house here we're getting out of Oregon from OBC, and we have plans to put up a second one here shortly. All of the other parts that we use, we get from local hardware stores, or there's a nursery company in Sumner where we can get plastic and buy remay. So we can get it all local.
So what are the different types of season extension that you use?
Well, we use this big greenhouse. This was our first greenhouse, first structure that we built, and it's a major one.
And this one's permanent?
This one's permanent. It's buried in concrete, and it's 30 by 90, and it's a pretty standard greenhouse. And we would grow salad mix in the wintertime and tomatoes in the summertime. And then, so what was the question again?
The
types of greenhouse. Okay, yeah. And why? But that was why. And then we went to low tunnels, and we followed instructions. I'm not sure where we got instructions first, but it actually had a piece of wood along the side that we would fasten it to. But we had some really pretty bad wind storms, yeah. And the whole thing blew up, and it looked like beach whales out here, and I mean, it was unreal. So I even went back to the East Coast on a couple of farmer-to-farmer workshops and talked to people who had been using them back there. So I got the low tunnel. Well, it's still a high tunnel, but it's much smaller than this one, because it's just barely clears my head, and it's only about 12 feet or to 14 feet wide.
It's movable.
And we can take it apart and move it. Yeah.
So what materials do you use in the low tunnel in the high tunnel versus this greenhouse?
We use plastic PVC pipe and ropes, duct tape, and a few posts, and plastic. Okay. So it's much simpler, and to put up, you know, a couple of people should be able to put it up in 6 hours or so.
So this one has steel pipes.
Yeah, and we can put that one up for $500 or less, I think, too. So depending on the price of the plastic, which tends to go up and down.
What's
Yeah.
the size of that?
Well, that one's, we make them 12 by 96 probably. Plastic usually comes in 100-foot lengths, so that's what we use. And we have to extend it past on either end, so that uses up 10 feet or so there.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we put, in the summertime we don't worry about doors. In the wintertime you have to worry about sealing it up all the way, because otherwise wind gets under it. Most of our wind problems are probably in the fall and then in the late winter as the seasons are changing, and that's when you see the wind problems, but most of the rest of the time we're okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, you were describing to me the different types of season extension designs that you use. You use the greenhouse and the high tunnel and row cover?
We use row cover, but we also do what's called a low tunnel, and that's remade over a pipe as well. And these are only 10-foot pipes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the
And
low
that
tunnel.
and that's the low tunnel. And I actually think that it does a better job than actually putting remade flat on the plant. Yeah.
Why is that?
And I don't know why, but it just seems that way,
Okay.
because you've got more surface in there with the plant underneath it, so you've got more air. And we've used it on spinach very early in the spring, and one thing we noticed is that the spinach was quite clean when we harvested it, because normally after a rain you've got really dirty spinach, but anything under that low tunnel, that remade, it was magically clean because there weren't any raindrops pounding down on it. We used it on basil this summer because it's just been a cool summer, and basil just wasn't growing. We did have some basil inside a high tunnel with plastic, and we planted some outside, and it was just sitting there, and we put the low tunnels under, and it's just like magic. You can see a change in 3 or 4 days with that low tunnel.
So you've got the greenhouse, the high tunnel, the low tunnel,
And
and
then the row cover.
What are the different uses for each of those?
Well,
What's
gosh,
the purpose of each
there's-
of those?
there's-
When do you use the greenhouse versus
Yeah.
a high tunnel versus a low tunnel?
Okay, well that depends on the season. We use the low tunnels. Well, the low tunnel we use in early spring over early spring crops. Because like I said, we use it on spinach, but we can also cover salad mix with it. So that's mostly what we'd use that for. And then in the fall, we're using it on spinach, on salad mix again. We used it on basil all summer. And so that's what we'll use that for, is those low crops. The high tunnel, we use, in the summertime, we put like 2 beds of tomatoes or cucumbers in there. We might use it for basil. With the high tunnel, we put them in 2 different widths. We can put them at like 12 feet or 14 feet. And then we use it for the salad mix or basil. It barely covers my head, but we decided that since we're always kneeling most of the time to plant and harvest and reseed, so it really didn't matter that it wasn't too high. But if you want to put tomatoes in or cucumbers, it needs to be higher, so we move it closer together, and so it's 10 feet wide. Even then it's almost too short for tomatoes, but it works for us. And row cover by itself we use on crops early spring, sometimes to protect them from insects such as carrot rust fly on carrots, and some of the other pests that we have on the kale crops too, especially radishes, because you can end up with lots of worms in your radish. So the row cover works good on that. Yeah.
And the big one?
The big one, well, we use it for salad mix in the wintertime, and of course we use it for starting plants. We also have a heat table in here for starting plants, and then the summertime we put tomatoes in here. Yeah.
So you mentioned a few of the crops that you grow. Are there any others that you grow specifically using one type or another of season extension? You mentioned tomatoes and basil and cucumbers and salad mix.
Those are the biggest items, actually.
Okay.
Kales and collard greens do very well outside without cover. They will do just fine all winter, even without cover. What other crops would there be? Strawberries in the spring, like towards the end of April. I live in a place that gets frost. We have frost later in the season than most other farmers, and so I use row cover on top of the strawberries while they're blossoming until probably almost mid-May. We have to pay attention to the weather a lot. So strawberries are a big one. We've talked about putting high tunnels over berries, and we might have to do that because, like right now, all this rain is wiping out our raspberries, and some of them we've hardly started picking, but they get moldy when it's rainy, so we're losing them. But another thing about having some of those high tunnels, you get a lot of plastic out there on that type of a tunnel. And well, I'm thinking of hay groves, for example, or something similar which is what they often use on berries. And you always have your wind event on Saturday night when you have nobody to help you take down the wind, take down the plastic. So anyway, that's a consideration too. You have to have people around to help you pull down that plastic.
So you pull the plastic down in the anticipation of a wind.
Yeah. Well, if you're using hay groves or something similar.
Hay groves?
Hay grove tunnel is another kind of high tunnel
Okay.
that's big enough to just. It doesn't necessarily even have walls. It's just a high tunnel to
Okay.
protect from rain and whatnot. And we don't have any of those yet. This plastic is always on here, on this one, yeah. So.
How much longer can you extend the season on either side?
Oh, well. We can extend it a long ways actually, because we can use it all winter for salad mix. And then we start spinach in February, and by mid-March we can have really nice spinach. So
can you talk a little bit about the difference between when crops are growing versus harvesting using season extension?
Okay. Things don't grow in the wintertime here. You have to, so it's not, yeah. Things don't grow. Some Asian greens will. Mizuna, baby bok choy, and some of those other, komatsuna and things will actually grow, but other things grow very, very slowly. So if we harvest it, it's a good 4 weeks or something. So my goal, there again, I go back to Elliot Coleman and his books. So I get ideas from him. You have to realize that where he lives is like being at Eugene, Oregon. And here in Washington, we're the darkest place in the continental United States in December. So Elliot says you have to have things fully grown or harvestable size by 10 hours of daylight. And for us, that's very early November. So if you want spinach all winter, you actually have to have it at harvestable size by November 1st. So the timing back in August is critical. And then of course, like this year, we've had some really, really nice weather. So things grew faster than we wanted them to actually.
Right.
And they can get too big and need to be harvested earlier. So yeah, everything we grow, you have to think about that November 10th or November 1st date.
So you grow it to harvestable size by November, and then from November till when?
Till about the 10th of February or something.
Is when you're simply harvesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then by February you can start to.
We can start reseeding and growing things again. It seems like it's a shorter time for days to get longer in the spring than it is for getting shorter in the fall, which is kind of weird. Yeah. And so you have to, if you know you're going to have to pick so much salad mix or so much kale or whatever, you have to plant more so that you know that you're only going to be picking it every 4 or 5 weeks during the wintertime. Yeah. So we don't have all the answers to that yet, but we're working on it.
Right. It sounds like an important consideration for season extension.
Yeah.
Do you have to do anything differently to prepare the ground for a greenhouse or high tunnel or low tunnel?
Yeah, no, we really don't. I just go ahead and prepare it as we normally do. If we need calcium, we add calcium. Sometimes we do soil tests to see what the nitrogen is at that point, to see if we've used up all the nitrogen from summer crops, and maybe we might add more. But otherwise, I just do what we normally do. Yeah, just till it and plant. Yeah.
And what about managing fertility?
Well, managing fertility is a good question.
Undercover.
Yeah, because nitrogen is probably the biggest issue, and some people worry that there's actually too much nitrogen, could be too much nitrogen in your fall and winter crops. And I've not checked that to see if it's an issue. Like I just said, sometimes we do soil tests to find out. I know that in this big greenhouse, we've been using this for 10 years or so, and we need to add more fertility in here. So I'm thinking we're going to put compost in here this fall and till that in, and maybe do some cover crops in half of it, and then plant the lettuce in the rest of it, and then switch it over in the spring. Yeah. So those are things that we need more research on, actually, because we really don't have any answers for those. Yeah.
So that research would be
about what fertility do we need. Things seem to grow fine, though. We have really sandy soil here, for one thing, so we can keep growing all winter. That's another whole issue, is the fact how wet your soil is, and some farmers can't do any winter cropping because of their high water tables and that sort of thing. But we have very sandy soil, so that has benefited us in a big way. I mean, I just go a half mile and find farms underwater, so they can't do this, but we can. But we also deal with a bit more. It's colder here,
right?
So that's one reason for doing it. Yeah.
What about concern about nitrates accumulating?
Yeah. Well, I haven't had any testing done, so I don't know. I do not add additional fertilizer in the winter, so because I've heard that that's a concern, and then other people have said it's not a concern. So I don't know. That's where we need more research, I guess. Yeah.
What about pests? Pest management, weeds, insects, disease?
Well, in the wintertime,
undercover?
We do have winter weeds here, because we have chickweed, which seems to grow all winter. But that's actually not a problem till early spring, it seems to me, usually, when things start growing again. Pests are more likely to be moles and mice. Yeah, that's one of the advantages in the wintertime, is you do not have the bug pests that you do in the summertime. However, you're more likely to have mold, and that's sort of the funguses that grow well in our damp, cool climate. So one of the things that we have learned, because Elliot Coleman, again, we've used his ideas to get started, and he plants his things really close together. Well, he lives in a dry climate, and we've decided that we need to plant things further apart. We need to put our rows further apart and plant the plants a little bit further apart.
And you learn that by
trial and error, yes, yeah. So that's what we do.
How about irrigation? Do you have?
We don't irrigate in the wintertime.
Even undercover?
Even undercover. Sometimes early spring, if things are really growing, we get a lot more sunshine, because early spring, you get to late February or March, and if we have lots of sunshine and things really start growing, you may have to irrigate. But sometimes, especially with the low tunnels, you can just pull the top off and let the rainwater do its thing. We're not set up to do drip irrigation all around the farm. I can use drip in here, but we've hardly ever had to do that. For a lot of the fall crops, for example, we don't put the tunnel up till after we've had a couple of good rains, and so the water has soaked up in the ground, and so it seems to last pretty good. But I think sometimes things will, sometimes we've actually had to go out with just buckets Yeah, and just water. Yeah.
So inside this permanent structure, you would use drip.
I have water here,
Yeah.
but way out in the field, I don't have a way to do that without doing it by hand. Yeah, yeah. We do desperate things sometimes, like hauling water.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Another question I have is about how do you decide where to put, say, a low tunnel or a high tunnel, or even bigger permanent structure like this?
Well,
Where to put it and how do you orient it?
well, I consider wind, and that's because last fall we had some things blow away. We were out here at 11 o'clock at night tying things down so they wouldn't blow away. So I have tried to choose places where we get some wind protection from maybe the raspberry plants, for example, because we grow lots of raspberries. So this winter, this fall, we are planting all the things. We plan to put a hoop house over next to those raspberry plants. And then low tunnels close to that. We're running them north and south because that's the way our fields are set up. I would probably like to do it east to west because they say you get more sunshine. What little sun we get in the wintertime, that it's more useful, but it just doesn't work. So we've been doing north and south. Yeah. So things still seem to grow. And think about the big structures on the south side of your property too, because we've got really tall trees, and there's no point in planting too close to those because it'll shade everything out. Yeah, yeah.
What about I think you alluded to this a little bit earlier, but the timing of when you plant, when it's going to be undercover, or both when you're extending into winter and when extending out of winter, I guess you might say. What is the timing?
Well, timing.
That you have to consider?
Well, you just have to keep planting because, especially in the fall and winter, you're going to start planting back in August, and then how fast things grow is determined by what the weather is in August and September and even October. So a lot of the stuff that we planted mid-August and early September, we're already harvesting it. So we're planting every 4 days, or we're trying to. It would be good to plant twice a week so that you've always got something going, and we're taking out summer crops, preparing the ground, and we're just planting a lot these days, believe it or not. Until we reach a point where it's actually too late to plant. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Let's see. Oh, do you have a sense of how much temperature control or difference you get with the different covers? Or
I've not ever measured it, but boy, the basil this summer under the houses. In fact, I've had trouble with basil for 2 years now, and part of it I decided was water. But I know I've got basil over here right now that we never did cover, versus basil that are under 2 low tunnels with remay, and big difference, big difference. So, and I'm not sure what the temperature. Well, it's just warmer, and of course the weeds are growing very well under the tunnels too, because it's much warmer, yeah. And it's just like standing here right now, we're a good 10, 15, maybe even 20 degrees warmer than outside, yeah. So in the wintertime, it can be very, very nice in here and very cold outside, yeah.
Do you have a sense of what volume or what portion of your crops are grown under cover versus the whole farm?
Well, it's probably less than 20%. Of course, in the wintertime, well, even then, it's less than 50% in the wintertime too, because we harvest lots of kales, the root vegetables, and all those things all winter. So I'd say probably only 20%. Yeah, yeah. Of course, virtually all the tomatoes are under cover in the summertime, and then the salad mixes all under winter in the wintertime. So
another aspect of season extension that is related is market extension, and so harvesting storage crops that you can keep, and then
well, marketing is a big is the biggest issue and the biggest reason for doing what we're doing. Because number one, we have built-in customers because we have a CSA. We do it year-round. We have all 4 seasons: summer, fall, winter, and spring. And I suppose we started doing that because we had chickens which lay eggs all winter, so we needed to keep our customers. I wanted to keep several people employed all winter, and so all these things, we had a market. So that was one of the reasons we continued to do this. Because if you didn't have a market, didn't have a place to sell it, you're doing a lot of work for nothing. So you've got to know what your markets are to begin with. You have to start with your markets, yeah. Before you even start doing this, yeah.
There was one other use of the covers that you didn't mention, but you did just now, though. Chickens, and that's sort of
right,
not,
yeah.
That is a season extension of sorts.
Well, it is, because they need to be protected, especially, well, they need to be protected from rain all year round. They can be out, they love being outdoors in the summertime, but boy, if it's raining, you need to have cover. So we've actually built hoop houses for them. They're not covered with plastic, they're covered with something else because it should be fairly dark inside. And they don't like it hot either, so you've got to use something to keep it dark. And in the wintertime, we actually will bring them into a larger hoop house close to the house, and so that they're more easy to care for, and it gives them a lot more space on rainy days, because they're not like ducks. They don't like being wet.
Right, and then that's part of your crop rotation system?
Yes, that's true. We, in the summertime, we move our hens around the farm, and especially on places where we've just taken out something like berries or something, we'll put them there during the summer, and then move them and till that up and put a cover crop there, and then use it for planting next spring.
And same thing, so they've wintered in a hoop house, come spring you move them.
We can move them back out on pasture, and actually about all you could put in there then after chickens have been in a hoop house are probably tomatoes or cucumbers that you can trellis so that they're up. You could grow corn in there for get really early corn, but I think the tomatoes are probably more important than corn, yeah.
So what are some of the benefits and drawbacks of using cover for season extension?
Well, drawbacks, well, would be the wind, constant surveillance, yeah. So you've got to have somebody here monitoring it, you know. So we try to have, we have somebody living on the farm so that one or the other of us is usually here in case of wind. Like I said earlier, choosing what type of structure you're going to use. Some of the high tunnels, like the Haygrove Tunnel, if the wind is blowing, you've got to have somebody there to be able to pull it down. So if everybody's away from the farm, you're in trouble. If you live in a place where there's lots of snow, then you're going to have, you probably want a peaked roof. I know our high tunnels that are round, if we get lots of snow, either you got to be there to keep clearing the snow off, or they will actually collapse. And that has happened a couple of times, but they popped right back up, and so things weren't too badly damaged. So those are some of the drawbacks. And in the summertime when it's hot, you have to be on top of opening them up for ventilation, and so it doesn't get too hot in there. But all the benefits, well, you get to grow more food. Yeah, production is much better. And then to have food later in the season, you know, the farmers markets are opening earlier in the spring, and the only way you're going to get earlier crops in the spring is with some sort of season extension, I think, yeah. Yeah. So.
Just forgot my question. Oh, how do you open them for ventilation?
Well, our big greenhouse, we roll up the sides, which is another one of those drawbacks. Somebody has to be here, and okay, the sun's out this morning, so you know you have to open it up early. And if it's cloudy and cool, we probably don't need to open it up. The low tunnels, high tunnels that are outside the hoops, the hoop houses, I have found that if you open up the corner that faces the wind, because we know which direction our wind comes from, and then open up the opposite corner, then we get ventilation through there. During the summer when it's really hot, you can roll up the whole thing, even drop the plastic sometimes, all the way over to one side. And in the wintertime, it is more of a challenge because we actually, to close them up in the wintertime, we actually dig a trench along each side and bury the plastic to help us hold them down so they won't blow away in the wind. But we've left that one corner open and the opposite corner open so we can open them up during the day. Because even in the wintertime, you need ventilation or you're going to have lots of mold in there, too much moisture.
Right.
Yeah.
So for mold issues, the strategies are ventilation and plant spacing.
Yes. Yeah.
And is the plastic that you use, say, on a big permanent structure the same thickness as what you would use on a high tunnel or a low tunnel?
Oh, well, it probably is. We've chosen to use ultraviolet UV protected plastic that has a life of guaranteed for 4 years. We've tried construction plastic probably the first year or two, and boy, it just disintegrates even in one season. So that didn't work too well.
And do you find that you get 4 years out of it? Or do you go beyond?
Well, pretty much, and I even go beyond. One of the things about moving the plastic all the time, you're actually dragging it in the dirt, and we've discovered that it's hard to. So we probably are cutting down lots of light, just simply because it's dirty. But somehow, I think it still works okay. Yeah, and it even gets rips and holes in it sometimes too, because since we've got posts inside there for tomatoes, for trellising tomatoes, so sometimes when we're moving things or taking them off, it drops and you end up with a hole in it.
Oh, right.
So we just call it air conditioned.
Right.
And use it anyway. So we find lots of uses for the plastic even after its hoop house life is over. Yeah. Yeah.
And then the PVC piping that you use, what do you tend to use a certain size?
Well, with the low tunnels, you want a 1/2 inch, 10 feet. Dick tried getting a 3/4 once, and we went out there and started using it. I said, something's wrong here. This is too stiff. So I went back in to look at the book, Elliot Coleman's book again, and it was 1/2 inch, and that makes a big difference there. And I think on the Schedule 40 is what they call it on the high tunnel PVC. Yeah, and those are 20 feet long. So.
And does that?
And I've used them for a long time, and for many years, in fact, and they have not. Only once, the last time we got a really, really bad snowstorm and they collapsed. I noticed some of them actually broke then, but we had been using them for quite a few years at that point.
So you find you don't have to replace the piping very
No, yeah. And so, it does concern me that we're using PVC pipe, but gosh. And you can use metal, and you can buy metal benders in the whole works and go that route if you want to, but we've chosen to do the PVC. Mm-hmm.